In this episode, we're going to look at using Pact to drive out the implementation of a HTTP producer, or API. Hi, I'm Mark Bradley, and welcome to Testing All the Things, a screencast in which we use live coding to demonstrate different types of testing tools and techniques. In this video, we are going to use the Pact file created in the previous video where we created the HTTP consumer implementation. Let's look at the code. As I said in the introduction, we are going to use the Pact file created in the previous video. For this example, I have just copied over the Pact file and I'm going to store it here in the directory called Pact. I have already installed Pact and PHP unit, and I've started a very simple test. I have also installed and set up Slim. At the moment there are no roots, but it just handles any errors cleanly for us. Let's tidy up all our files so we can see everything we need to. And move that to the right. No, wrong way. Move the implementation to the right. Okay. The first thing we need to do is set up our test, and set up our test to use the Pact file that we've brought in. So if we create a new test over here on the left, and let's just call it person consumer. There we go. The test we're about to create uses the Pact library, which makes use of the Pact file to create a single test to test our producer. The first thing you need to create is a verifier config. So we'll create a config equals new verifier config, like so. This object needs a little bit of setting up. So config, and the first thing we want to do is set the provider name. So set provider name, which is going to be the name of our service. So to keep it nice and simple, we're going to call it a person provider, or call it person provider even. Provider. Okay. And we want to set the version that this is currently running on. So we'll set provider version. And this uses semver, so we're just going to say it's 1.0.0. So it's the first version. And now we need to tell Pact where this service is running. So for testing, I'm going to just make use of PHP's inbuilt server. I'm not going to play with Docker or anything at this point. I just want to make this nice and simple. So we're just going to run the application using PHP straight off my machine. So we need to set provider base URL. So that's HTTP. It's local host, and running on port 8080. There we go. And we need to say whether we want to publish a result. So set publish results. We'll set that to true. Okay, nice and simple. So that sets up the configuration for verification of our Pact file. Now we need to set up our verifier. So we have a verifier equals new verifier. Okay. And that takes the config. So config passed in, like so. There's lots of different ways of verifying Pact files. For this example, we're just taking the simple one of copying it from the consumer code base, pasting it into the producer code base and running it there from the file. Later on, we'll look at some more automatic ways to do this. But for now, just copying and pasting the files will just demonstrate what Pact can do for us. So on the verifier, we want to run verify files. Now this takes an array of files. We only have one at the moment, so we'll just give it the one we have. So underscore directory, and it's from our current location back one directory and Pact, and then it's called person consumer person provider.json. There we go. Within this, Pact does all of its verification and assertions, and there's no assertion to call, but PHP unit at the version I'm using it will warn if you don't have any assertion. So we're just going to add a passing assertion just so that we have a fully passing test without any warning. So this assert true is true. There we go. Okay. So we know if we got to there, our tests, our Pact verification has worked. Now we've got our test all set up and our Slim application has some basic setup. We're going to start running our PHP server. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the PHP inbuilt server. So if we switch over here and we do PHP, there we go. Okay, so we're going to use the PHP's inbuilt server. We're going to run on port 8080 and we're going to get it to run web index, which is what's over here on our right hand side, just a very basic Slim application. So if we start that running, okay, it's off and running, we can now run our test. So vendor bin PHP unit to run the test as usual. So we'll run that. Okay. So if we look at, we have an error. We can see what it is. So here we go. Okay, so we've got a few bits of failing. So looking at it, so it's failing on a 200. It's expecting a 200, but as we saw below, it was getting 404, and it's failing on the matching of the body. So if we go down and have a look at this, so we expected 200, and we got a 404, as we said, and the body we expected was first name, last name, alias, but it seems we're getting back message and not found, which is to be expected because at the moment we don't even have any root set up. So if we look at our test output, we can see that here it's trying to get person and ID. So if we close this down and we maybe try to get the first bit to pass, let's get it to return a 200 when you make a request to person/any ID. So we can do that. Close the terminal off. We'll come over here to our application and we want to add a response to a get call. So application get. As we said, it was /person and slash, and then we can use curly braces ID, which allows us to pass anything into the URL after person, and hopefully you should get a response. So there we go. The second argument to the get function is another function, so function, and this has 3 parameters. The first parameter is a request, so request, and where is it? Same, there we go. Request, and let's import that to make it a little bit smaller. Request. The second one is the response, so response, and again, and we'll call that $response. And the final one is an array of arguments. So array, and we'll just call it $args. Okay, and close, there we go, braces, and it needs a semicolon. Now, this function here needs to return the response. So if we do return and $response, save, and now if we go back and run our test, hopefully this should make some of our test start to pass. So let's have a look. Okay, and scroll through. So that's still failing. Scroll to the top. Here we go. So we now see that has status code 200 is now passing, but we're still failing on the body match, and we're also failing on the header match. So I think the next simple thing to do would be to add the header to make that part pass. So if we just knock that down, response with header. Yeah, that's it. And the header we need to return is content type, and it needs to be of type application / JSON. Okay. Now the with header returns a response, so we can do response equals with header. There we go. Okay, that's quite simple and clean. And now let's run our test and see where we're at. Have we solved that problem? Okay, and we'll scroll up, and looks like, oh no, content type, that's right, correctly, application / JSON, application / JSON. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. I wonder, what is it returning? Does it say the diff? Text HTML. Maybe it's because we're not setting the body to anything yet, so maybe we could give that a go. So we need a body, so let's, for now, to make it pass, what we can do is we'll create an empty array. So body equals empty array, and then $response get body, just do this really quickly, right, JSON encode the body. And let's see if that fixes it. Where are we? We might have. Yes, there we go. So we're now down to one failing part of our test, the matching of the body. And as we can see, it actually is empty, but what we are expecting is first name, last name, and an alias. So let's add that to our body. So first name, that is Dade, so, and last name is /Murphy, and finally our alias is 0 cool. Okay, so that will get pushed through. So hopefully that means our implementation is complete and we have a working test. Let's have a look. We do. Excellent. So we've now got the correct return status. We've got the correct header with the correct content type, and our body is in the right format, which is great. Our test pass. This is one of the nice things about Pact, is obviously it's testing for a single use case, the use case of our consumer that we wrote last time. But obviously an API can have multiple consumers with multiple use cases. Let's look at what happens, say, if another consumer requires us for some reason to add the age of our person. So they are 26. Okay. Now, we're not interested in this at all. We've shown no interest in this. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Pact file we created, because all we were interested in were these three things. But will it break? No, it doesn't. And this is really good. This is one of the great powers of Pact. It allows us to have things that are additional to the certain consumer's requirements in the response. But as long as the pieces that you're interested in are there, it passes. So if we had multiple files now, and we had another file, a Pact file that did require the age, previously that one would have been breaking, but our one would have been passing. So we'd have been kind of in a semi-working state for a certain consumer. So we can show that by, to say we just take out the alias line, and this should make our test pass. But if the other consumers weren't interested in the alias, their test would still be passing. So let's just check that's giving the error we expect. Yeah, there you go. So you're saying that we're missing the alias. So that's really nice. So if we comment that back in and run it, and it passes. Now, obviously, this example is quite basic because if we say add the exclamation mark to the end of the alias and run a test, it's going to fail because it's we hard coded it to require an exact match on the strings. Now we could have added improved testing at our consumer side and maybe just looked for a string or use kind of some more fuzzy matching so that we didn't have to hard code this value into or have that exact value. The other thing is what obviously we could use this for is kind of an end-to-end test of our service, and the Pact setup allows us to maybe kind of have a before our test runs. So before our test runs, we could inject a user with the right ID into our database and all of the values, and then our Pact test actually makes a call to the API, goes all the way through to the database, all of the different layers of code, returns that, and tests everything works correctly. So we'll just fix that test now and just make a final run to make sure it passes before we finish. Okay, so there we go. So we have our working tests and we have our really nice, very simple example of using a Pact file in a HTTP producer in PHP. As I said previously in this example, we just copied the Pact file from the previous project. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll look at using the Pact broker as a communication tool that sits in between the Pact consumer and the Pact producer. Thank you for watching this episode of Testing All the Things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please rate and review the video and subscribe to the channel. If you did not and you have any feedback, please leave a comment in the comment section of the video or contact me on Twitter @Bradle.